The courtroom had gone still, the kind of still that presses against your eardrums and makes your own heartbeat feel too loud. Every shuffle had stopped. Every cough, every whispered side comment, evaporated the second my daughter stood up from the gallery bench. She was wearing that ridiculous purple hoodie she insisted on every time something big happened, the one with glitter unicorns and half a peanut butter stain near the zipper. She was 7, barely taller than the bench itself, her hair tied back in a crooked ponytail she had begged to do herself that morning. In her hands, she clutched a folded piece of lined notebook paper, the edges wrinkled, corners bent, probably from being stuffed into the side pocket of her backpack between a pink mechanical pencil and half a granola bar. But the way she stood, it was like the room belonged to her. She looked at the judge with the kind of quiet composure that adults pay therapists to fake. "Your Honor," she said, voice soft but piercing in the silence. "Can I read something I wrote?" I felt my chest seize. I hadn't told her to do this. I hadn't even known she was planning it. There were no rehearsals, no cue cards. Just her, a crumpled piece of paper, and a courtroom full of strangers deciding whether I was going to be her mother on paper, or just a memory. The judge blinked slowly, as if unsure whether he'd heard correctly. "You wrote something?" he asked gently, leaning forward. She nodded. "Yes, sir. For you." And right then, I think everyone in that room knew something had changed. It was the way her voice didn't tremble. The way she unfolded that paper like it held a secret. The way even my ex-mother-in-law, the woman who brought this entire battle upon us, stopped tapping her manicured fingers and stared, eyes narrowed but unblinking. What came next changed everything. I never thought I'd be in court fighting for custody of my own child. Not against a stranger. Not against the state. Against someone I once called family. But I should have seen it coming. My name's Haley Monroe, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm 35. I'm a single mom, a freelance copywriter, and for the past 3 years, I've been trying to hold it together after losing the love of my life in a freak hiking accident. Ryan was everything I wasn't. Steady when I spiraled. Calm when I cracked. The kind of man who could make a crying baby laugh and a burnt casserole edible. When he died, I lost my compass. But I had Lila. And Lila saved me. We grieved in tandem, in messy, tangled rhythms, her with her art projects and nonsensical bedtime stories, me with tears cried into cereal bowls and spreadsheets at 2 a.m. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I made grilled cheese when there was nothing left in the fridge. I sold furniture I didn't need to pay for dance classes I couldn't afford. I let her sleep in my bed when nightmares came, and they came a lot. That was motherhood for me. Not perfect, but present. And then Elaine showed up. Again. Ryan's mother, Elaine Langston, was always poised. Controlled. The type of woman who wore beige cashmere to PTA meetings and hosted book clubs with wine pairings. To her, I was a phase her son would grow out of. Only he never did. After Ryan died, I thought maybe we'd finally understand each other. We both loved him. We both adored Lila. But grief didn't soften Elaine. It sharpened her. She began picking apart my life piece by piece, like a crow eyeing a broken pocket watch. "Why don't you put Lila in private school?" she'd ask, every other weekend. "She needs a stronger foundation." Then came the prep school brochures mailed to my house. The unsolicited bank transfer offers. The condescending recommendations about discipline and nutrition and developing ambition at a young age. I tried to be civil. Until the envelope came. Legal documents. Filed in Multnomah County Court. Petition for full custody of my daughter. Elaine Langston was trying to take my child. And the worst part? She had money. A reputation. And one of the top family lawyers in the entire state. Me? I had a public defender who couldn't remember my name on the first day. But I also had Lila. I won't lie and say I didn't break down. I did, many times. In showers. Behind closed doors. In the car parked outside her school while pretending I was on a call. But never in front of her. Lila needed my strength. So I wore it like armor. And I documented everything. I turned into my own damn paralegal, organizing folders with school reports, pediatrician records, art projects, bedtime photos, emails from teachers. I made a case not just to keep my daughter, but to prove that our love wasn't a liability. Still, every night, I lay awake wondering. Was it enough? Would a judge think love, pancakes, and safety nets made out of borrowed time were enough? Elaine's lawyer said I was unstable. That I worked freelance when I could. That I had no family nearby, no backup plan, no real income. That I suffered from emotional exhaustion after my husband's death and that my child was being raised in chaos. They said I was soft. And the cruel thing is, part of me believed it. But then came that moment. In the courtroom. After all the statements. After Elaine's lawyer made me sound like a charity case with mascara smudged beneath her eyes and too many half-paid bills. That's when Lila stood up. And all the white noise in my head, the panic, the fear, the courtroom whispers, cut out. It was just her. Her tiny voice. Her giant heart. And that letter. Grief isn't a switch you flip. It's a ghost that moves in and rearranges the furniture of your life when you're not looking. After Ryan died, everything changed. Not just my home or my routine, but the way people looked at me. The way she looked at me. Elaine had always kept her distance when Ryan was alive. I wasn't exactly her picture of a Monroe daughter-in-law. Too unrefined. Too messy. I had tattoos. Wore jeans to brunch. Brought store-bought cookies to her Christmas dinners. And when I dared to speak my mind about politics or parenting, she would tighten her pearls and change the subject. But Ryan loved me, and so, Elaine tolerated me. Until she didn't have to anymore. At first, she showed up with casseroles and offers to watch Lila anytime I needed a break. I thought it was kindness, grief shared. I thought, for once, we were on the same side. I even let her take Lila on weekends, thinking it might help them both heal. I didn't see the setup coming. The questions started small. How's work going, Haley? Are you still freelancing? Lila mentioned she had cereal for dinner the other night. Everything okay? Do you have a savings account, dear? What if something happens to you? I answered politely. Briefly. Naively. She wasn't concerned, she was collecting. By the time I realized she was building a case, it was already too late. The day the envelope arrived, it was raining. Not poetic, gentle mist, the kind of sideways, windshield drowning storm that turns mail into mush before you make it to the porch. I remember because I was holding Lila's pink umbrella, trying to shield her science project as we came back from school. I scooped the soggy stack of bills and junk mail off the welcome mat, peeled apart the one from Langston and Pierce LLP, and froze. My hands went numb. Inside, a summons to court. Petition for full legal custody. Filed by Elaine Langston, my mother-in-law. The words blurred as I reread them, emotional instability. Financial insecurity. Lack of extended family support. Potential neglect. Neglect? She had painted me as some unstable woman spiraling into dysfunction, ignoring the child I tucked in every night, the child whose backpack I packed, whose nose I wiped, whose heart I held together while barely keeping my own from shattering. I fell to the floor of the living room, the paper clenched in my fist like it was burning my skin. Lila was in the other room, singing along to a cartoon. I remember thinking, she has no idea her whole world is about to be put on trial. I called my sister, Emma, who drove over within 20 minutes, coat half on, fury fully loaded. She scanned the documents and just whispered, "Oh my God, she's really doing this." Emma is a high school teacher, practical, unshakable, fiercely loyal. She looked at me like I was a student being unfairly suspended, and someone needed to raise hell. "She's playing chess," Emma said, pacing. "This wasn't spontaneous. She's been planning this." That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I stayed up on my laptop googling phrases like how to win a custody battle when you're broke and can grief be used against you in family court. The answers terrified me. And then came the whisper, quiet but poisonous, what if she's right? What if I wasn't enough? The following week, I met with a legal aid attorney named Ben. He was polite, competent, but tired. The kind of tired that comes from managing a caseload 3 times what it should be. He glanced at my file and offered a sympathetic smile. "She's hiring Alan Bristow," he said. "He's formidable." Alan Bristow was one of those silver-haired courtroom sharks who'd been profiled in magazines and referred to as the Velvet Hammer. He specialized in strategic custody realignment. That's legalese for, he helps wealthy people take children away from struggling ones. I sat in that cracked vinyl chair in Ben's office while he ran through strategy. Stay calm. Document everything. Don't retaliate. Don't speak to her directly. Record interactions if you can. What if I lose? I asked. He paused. Let's not start there. I became a machine. I started printing everything, Lila's report cards, pediatrician notes, school attendance, art projects, even screenshots of our grocery lists. I gathered evidence like my life depended on it, because it did. Meanwhile, Elaine didn't let up. She visited Lila with fake smiles and veiled jabs. "You'd look so cute in a real school uniform. Do you ever wish you had a backyard with a pool? Sometimes grown-ups just don't make the right decisions. That's why Grandma's here." Then Lila asked me, in her little girl voice with a twist of confusion, "Mommy, would I be happier if I lived with Grandma?" It broke something in me. I realized this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a siege. Elaine wasn't trying to co-parent. She was trying to replace me. Then came the CPS visit. Unannounced. Early afternoon. I was on a Zoom call with a client when the doorbell rang. Lila was at the kitchen table, building Lego castles in her pajamas. The social worker stepped in, clipboard in hand, and said someone had filed an anonymous concern. Neglect. Child left unattended. Unstructured home environment. I gave her the tour. Explained everything. Offered to connect her with Lila's teacher. She was kind, but formal. Took notes. Asked questions. Then left. I sat down on the floor and sobbed. I was drowning in paperwork, fear, exhaustion, and pretending every morning like things were fine. Lila didn't know. Or maybe she did. Kids always do. She started drawing more pictures of us. Stick figure versions with smiles and hearts. One had speech bubbles, "I love you more than dinosaurs," hers said. Mine replied, "Even on cereal nights?" I taped it to the fridge. I couldn't bring myself to take it down, even during those 3 a.m. panic spirals when I'd pace the kitchen wondering if I should have let Elaine in more, or less. What if the court bought her narrative? What if I was too soft? The first court date was brutal. Elaine walked in looking like a senator's wife, camel coat, silk scarf, expensive grief. Her lawyer made sure to open with phrases like emotional distress and lack of consistent income. They questioned my judgment, my lifestyle, my emotional availability. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled. But I told the truth. I told them about bedtime songs and Sunday pancakes and how I taught Lila to write her name by tracing cookie dough letters. I told them how we read about planets at night and whispered Dad would have loved that during fireworks. I told them we miss Ryan together and that healing, real healing, is messy and imperfect. But love lives in that mess. Still, I saw the way the judge looked at me. Polite. Measured. Unsure. That night, I couldn't eat. Again. Lila climbed into my bed with her stuffed giraffe and asked, "Do judges like pancakes?" I laughed. Almost cried. Then she said, "I want to tell the judge I like living here." I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "It's not your job, sweetheart. Mommy will take care of it." But in my heart, I didn't know if I could. Not alone. Then one night, I found her in the living room with a piece of paper and a glitter pen. "What are you working on, Bug?" "A letter," she said. "For court." "For court?" I blinked. She nodded. "In case they don't know how good you are at being my mom." I knelt beside her. "Baby, you don't have to do that." She looked up at me, steady, determined. "But I want to." She folded it twice, kissed it, and put it in her backpack. "Just in case," she whispered. I didn't know then that just in case would become everything. The courtroom would go still. The judge would lean forward. And a 7-year-old girl in a sparkly hoodie would read words that not only changed the case, but changed me. Forever. Every day felt like I was walking across a tightrope, shaky, alone, and one wrong step from losing everything. The court hearings weren't just legal proceedings, they were emotional battlegrounds. And I was showing up armed with manila folders, trembling hands, and faith that the truth would be enough. Elaine, on the other hand, arrived with perfect posture and a war chest. Her lawyer, Alan Bristow, wore a suit that probably cost more than my rent and a smirk that said he'd already calculated the win. He paced slowly in front of the judge, painting a picture of chaos and instability. His words were smooth, precise, practiced. "She's a mother doing her best," he'd begin, only to pivot into, "but good intentions don't equate to a stable home. The child deserves consistency. Structure. Support. Not emotion-based decision-making." He made love sound like a liability. Like my softness was a curse. I'd sit there, scribbling notes I didn't understand, my heart pounding so loud it made my vision blur. Ben, my overworked public defender, did his best, but he couldn't match Bristow's polish or performative empathy. He was a realist, not a showman. He'd lean over and whisper things like, "Let it go. Don't react. Stay calm. The judge is watching your face. Don't give them drama. Give them facts." But my body betrayed me. Every hearing felt like peeling off a layer of skin and asking them not to notice I was bleeding. And the worst part? Lila knew. She didn't know the legal terms. She didn't understand cross-examinations or jurisdiction. But she saw the stress written in the grooves of my forehead, in the way I lingered longer at bedtime, the way I watched her more closely at breakfast. Children don't need to understand court proceedings to know something is very, very wrong. The second hearing, Elaine's team introduced a new angle, emotional fatigue. They brought up quotes I'd made in passing on Facebook, posts from years ago when Ryan died. Phrases like, "Some mornings I don't know how to get out of bed," or "I don't feel like a whole person anymore." Out of context, they made me sound unstable. Like someone one bad day away from collapse. But I wasn't unstable. I was grieving. I was human. When I tried to explain that to the judge, how single mothers grieve while parenting, how there's no sick day for mourning when your child needs cereal and cuddles and clean socks, it felt like screaming into a void. They weren't listening for truth. They were listening for weakness. And then CPS showed up. Again. This time, the accusation was that I left Lila alone while I slept off a mental episode. It was completely fabricated, but they had to investigate. The caseworker was polite, but cool. She asked Lila questions. Looked in the fridge. Checked the locks. peered into our closet like it might reveal neglect in the form of mismatched towels. I stood there, biting the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't cry. When she left, she gave me a tight smile and said, "We'll be in touch." I watched the taillights disappear and closed the door with shaking hands. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I folded laundry. That's how trauma works sometimes. It makes you obsessed with order. That night, Lila drew a picture of the two of us on a boat, smiling while the waves were crashing around us. She had written Team Monroe at the top in sparkly blue marker. I taped it to the fridge, next to the first drawing. It became a shrine of quiet resistance. I started sleeping less, working more, trying to stay ahead of the next attack. But every time I thought I had done enough, Bristow would pull out another character concern, another way to question my parenting. One week, it was my lack of health insurance. The next, it was a missed dentist appointment I'd rescheduled twice. Then it was my freelance income fluctuating month to month. He said, "Lila deserves predictability." I wanted to yell, "She has it." I give her that. Even when I don't have it for myself, I give it to her. But I stayed still. Composed. Just like Ben said. I started walking around with a pit in my stomach. Every knock on the door, every call from an unknown number, made my hands sweat. Even grocery shopping became a calculation. What would a judge think if he saw my cart? Are sugary cereals proof of incompetence? I cut out takeout, signed up for a library reading hour, started documenting Lila's bedtime routine with time-stamped photos, just in case. I had become an exhibit in my own defense. The worst moment came 2 weeks before the final hearing. Lila's teacher called. She had a rough day, she said gently. Cried during art class. Said something about being taken away. I froze. I hadn't told her the specifics. I thought I was shielding her. But children feel the tremors before the quake. She had pieced it together in her own little way. That night, I found her curled up in bed, clinging to her stuffed giraffe, eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't belong on a 7-year-old's face. "Am I gonna have 2 houses now?" she whispered. I told her no. But I didn't believe it when I said it. I kissed her forehead and told her she was safe. Then I went into the kitchen and cried harder than I had since Ryan died. Emma came over the next day. She brought food I couldn't eat and a folder of old photos. Lila's 2nd birthday party. Her first day of kindergarten. A blurry selfie of us baking cupcakes, both of us covered in flour. She laid them out across the table like we were building a case for love. "You are enough," Emma said. "More than enough. But we need them to see it." I nodded. But inside, I was unraveling. I didn't know what else I could possibly do. That night, I found Lila again, sitting on the floor with her glitter pen and notebook. "What are you writing?" She looked up, serious and small. "A letter. For the judge." My throat closed. "Sweetie, you don't have to." "I know. But I want to." She smiled. "I just want them to know what it's like here. With you." Then she folded the paper carefully, like it was precious, and slid it into her backpack. "Just in case," she said again. The morning of the final hearing was cold and gray. Rain had turned to sleet, and the city felt like it was holding its breath. Lila wore her favorite hoodie, the purple one with the unicorn. I braided her hair like she asked, packed a snack in her backpack even though she probably wouldn't eat it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even try. We rode to the courthouse in silence. I held her hand so tight my knuckles went white. Elaine was already there. Designer coat. Perfect lipstick. Her lawyer beside her with a briefcase that looked like it came from a Bond film. I focused on the bench. On the ceiling. On anything but the possibility that I might lose. The judge entered. Everyone stood. I didn't breathe. And just before the closing statements began, Lila stood up. The courtroom was a strange kind of quiet. The kind where people aren't just silent, they're holding their breath. I sat behind the plaintiff's table, my fingers clenched around the edge, trying to hold on to something, anything, that would keep me grounded. Across the room, Elaine sat regal as ever, her legs crossed like she was waiting on a spa appointment rather than the outcome of a child's future. Her lawyer had just finished delivering a closing argument that sounded more like a TED Talk on parenting efficiency than a plea for custody. I expected the judge to lean in, clear his throat, and render a decision. But before he could say a word, Lila stood up. Tiny. Steady. 7 years old in glitter sneakers. My heart stopped. She didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead, chin lifted like I'd never seen before. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear, unshaken, "may I say something?" The courtroom froze. Not metaphorically. Literally. Even Bristow's perfectly poised pen paused midair. The judge blinked, surprised but not unkind. "You'd like to speak?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. I wrote something. It's short. I promise." He looked at me. I nodded, though my body had gone completely still. He motioned with his hand. "All right, go ahead." Lila reached into the front pocket of her unicorn backpack, the one I'd almost made her leave at home because it didn't match her nice courtroom clothes, and pulled out a folded piece of wide-ruled notebook paper. She unfolded it slowly, carefully, like it might rip if she wasn't gentle. I was already crying before she said a word. "My name is Lila Monroe," she read. "I'm 7. I like art, dinosaurs, and grilled cheese." People chuckled softly. The judge smiled. Elaine stiffened. "I live with my mom. She braids my hair, and she lets me tell stories during breakfast even when she's really busy. She makes pancakes on Sundays. They don't always look like pancakes, but she says they're abstract. I think that means funny-shaped." More soft laughter. I gripped the edge of my seat harder. "She helps me with math even when she doesn't like math. She lets me cry when I'm sad. Sometimes we miss my dad together. Sometimes we just hug." There was a pause. I saw the judge lean forward, elbows resting lightly on the bench. "She says being sad is okay, and so is being happy again. I didn't know you could be both until she said that." Her voice trembled a little on that sentence, but she kept going. "My grandma says my mom is too soft." She paused again. The air in the courtroom changed. Tighter. Sharper. "I think soft is good." Silence. "I don't want to live somewhere that says feelings are bad. Or that love has to be quiet. I want to live with my mom, because with her, I get to be a kid." She looked up then, directly at the judge. "I don't know all the grown-up stuff. But I know what home feels like. And this is home." She folded the letter. Slowly. Deliberately. Then she said, "Thank you," and walked back to me. Her little hand found mine. I pulled her close, but I didn't sob. Not yet. Because the room was still listening. Everyone was. The judge exhaled like he'd been holding his breath too. "This court recognizes the statement provided by the minor," he said carefully. "Though we typically do not allow children to testify in custody matters, it's clear that these sentiments were expressed voluntarily and reflect her emotional clarity." Elaine's lawyer shifted in his seat. I could see him calculating a rebuttal. But there wasn't one. Because nothing he said could erase the power of that moment. Not when truth had just been spoken in crayon handwriting and sparkly sneakers. The judge leaned back. He looked at me. Then at Elaine. Then at Lila. The question before this court is not who has the most resources, but what is in the best interest of the child. After reviewing all documents, statements, and testimony, my ears rang. My vision blurred. The court finds that Ms. Monroe retains full legal and physical custody of Lila Monroe. He turned to Elaine. Visitation arrangements may be revisited through court-appointed mediation, but there is no justification at this time for removing this child from her primary caregiver. Elaine opened her mouth. The judge raised his hand. Further argument is unnecessary. Just like that, it was over. Lila looked up at me. Did I do okay? I didn't answer. I just pulled her into my arms and held her so tight I think I may have stopped time for a second. My whole body shook from relief, from adrenaline, from everything I had carried for the past 6 months crashing down at once. You did more than okay, I whispered into her hair. You were brave. She smiled against my neck. I didn't say anything mean, she said. I just told the truth. We walked out of the courtroom hand in hand. Elaine didn't speak to us. She sat stiffly, her jaw clenched like steel. Her lawyer was already gathering documents, avoiding eye contact. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look back. Because victory, real victory, isn't about humiliation. It's about peace. And I finally had mine. Outside, the sun had finally come out. Lila squinted into the light. Can we get ice cream? I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. You can have 3 scoops. Even before dinner? Especially before dinner. She grinned, skipping slightly as we walked down the steps. That night, I found her letter taped to the fridge. She'd drawn a rainbow and a stick figure version of us hugging beneath it. She had signed it in red crayon. Below her name, she had drawn one tiny heart. That heart said everything. That letter changed everything. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was strategic. But because it was real. She says my mom is too soft, Lila repeated, standing in the middle of the courtroom, her voice small but steady. Then she looked up, straight at the judge, straight at the rows of adults who'd been talking over her life like she wasn't in the room, and said the words that made time stop. I think soft is good. You could hear the collective inhale of the room. 1,000 heartbeats caught in a single moment. She wasn't crying. She wasn't dramatic. She was just telling the truth. And it was devastating. I felt my hand squeeze the edge of the bench hard enough that the wood bit into my palm. My entire body was still, afraid that if I moved, I'd break the spell. I had never been so proud and so broken at the same time. Elaine, across the room, had gone ghost pale. Her composure cracked just slightly at the edges, eyes wide, jaw tensed, like she couldn't quite process what was happening. This was the one variable she hadn't accounted for. The child. The one person she assumed would stay silent or choose comfort. But Lila didn't choose comfort. She chose truth. My mom makes me feel safe when I'm scared, Lila continued. She doesn't get mad when I mess things up. She lets me talk, even when I don't know the right words. She paused, unfolded the bottom of the crumpled paper, and read the final lines like they were gospel. She lets me cry. She lets me laugh. She says it's okay to be both at the same time. And then, with more force than her tiny body should have carried, she finished. I want to live with someone who lets me feel. I want to stay with my mom. There it was. The sentence that flipped the entire power dynamic. Not money. Not lawyers. Not credentials. But the raw, unmistakable honesty of a child who knew what love was. Not structured. Not perfect. Not manicured into neat little charts and routines. But real. The judge sat back, fingers steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he spoke, his voice low, measured, and carrying more weight than anything we had heard all day. This court finds the statement from the minor not only relevant but deeply compelling. He turned to Elaine's attorney. I have reviewed your filings, Mr. Bristow. Your client's case is built upon assumption, projected concerns with no verified medical, academic, or psychological evidence. No signs of abuse. No neglect. No academic decline. And most importantly, no indication from the child that she is anything other than safe, loved, and stable. He turned to me. Ms. Monroe, you've presented as thoughtful, consistent, and deeply committed to your daughter's emotional well-being. In the absence of any factual grounds for removal, and in light of the child's own expressed desire. My heart pounded. This court grants you full legal and physical custody of Lila Monroe. My world tipped. I didn't sob, not yet. I was frozen. Lila squeezed my hand once, gently. I looked down at her, and she smiled. Visitation arrangements, the judge continued, now looking directly at Elaine, will be determined through court-appointed mediation, based on the child's emotional comfort and stability. But let me be clear, this courtroom will not entertain further attempts to override the child's primary bond with her mother, barring substantial cause. Elaine opened her mouth. The judge held up a hand. I will not debate this. It was done. The gavel didn't fall, but the sentence was thunderous. Ben, my exhausted, overworked attorney, leaned over and whispered, that was a masterclass. I blinked, still trying to absorb the gravity of what had just happened. You won, Haley. He smiled, and for the first time in all our weeks together, he looked relieved. I didn't win, I whispered. She did. Outside, the clouds were parting, letting sunlight push through for the first time that day. Lila tugged my sleeve. Does this mean I don't have to live in Grandma's house with all the rules and quiet rooms? I crouched down, eye level. It means you get to stay in the place where your feelings matter. She beamed. Then she asked, can I have pancakes for dinner? I laughed through the tears I couldn't hold anymore. Baby, you can have pancakes for dinner every night this week. That night, we didn't talk about the hearing. We just lived. I let her wear pajamas inside out. We made a blanket fort. She painted glitter all over her eyebrows and said she was a galactic warrior queen. I didn't clean it off. The next morning, I found her letter on the fridge, taped beside the drawing she'd made during the weeks I feared losing her. Under her name in red crayon, she had drawn a heart. Inside the heart, a smiley face. Above it, she had written 2 words, soft winds. And I finally realized. Soft isn't weak. Soft isn't careless. Soft is safe. Soft is where the healing lives. Soft is home. The courthouse steps felt different on the way down. On the way in, my legs had been trembling. My throat tight. I had been carrying the weight of every doubt, every sleepless night, every whispered conversation with myself at 3 a.m. in the dark. But on the way out? Lighter. Like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. Lila's hand was in mine. Her grip, firm but easy, like she somehow knew I needed her just as much as she needed me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. It wasn't until we got home, back to our little rented duplex with the half-painted fence and the sticky kitchen tiles, that I felt it. Peace. Not the dramatic kind. Not the fireworks and swelling music kind. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up in the way the light hits the living room carpet. In the smell of pancake syrup still clinging to the air from breakfast. In the sound of your child humming in the next room, safe, settled, whole. I stood there for a moment, one hand on the doorknob, listening to the normal. I realized I hadn't done that in months. Just listen. Later that evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, I saw it. The letter. Lila had taken it out of her backpack and taped it to the fridge herself, crookedly, with a strip of glitter unicorn tape. It was the same one she had read in court. Still wrinkled. Still creased where she had folded it tight, like it might break if she let it open too soon. Under her name, she'd added something in red crayon. Love is soft. Soft is strong. I leaned against the fridge, and for the first time since Ryan's death, I cried not out of fear, not out of exhaustion, but out of release. There had been so many moments in the last few months where I questioned everything. I thought, maybe I am too emotional. Maybe I am too soft. Maybe being a mess sometimes means I'm failing her. But that letter changed me. Because it wasn't a performance. She didn't write it to save me. She wrote it because she saw me. She felt our life, the small, unphotogenic moments that no court exhibit could fully capture, and she knew what mattered. It wasn't income brackets. It wasn't polished shoes or structured schedules. It was warmth. Safety. Unconditional love in all its messy, sleepy, bedtime story glory. A week later, we met with the court-appointed mediator to formalize visitation terms with Elaine. It was civil. Cold, but civil. I agreed to one supervised visit per month. Not because I wanted to reward Elaine's behavior, but because Lila still loved her. And I wasn't going to teach my daughter that love must come with hate attached. I wanted her to learn boundaries, yes, but not bitterness. Elaine never apologized. Not for the lies. Not for the lawsuit. Not for trying to dismantle the fragile life I'd rebuilt from the ashes. But that didn't matter anymore. Her words didn't have power over me now. Because I knew what kind of mother I was. And more importantly, so did Lila. The days returned to rhythm. Breakfast. School drop-offs. Homework on the couch. Impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. Lila made up a game called Courtroom Recess, where she banged a toy gavel and made her stuffed animals testify about who left Legos on the stairs. One evening, she asked if we could call Ryan's old number. We hadn't done that in a long time. I picked up the phone, held it gently against her ear, and she whispered, "Daddy, the judge said I get to stay with Mommy." I was really brave. Like you. I turned away so she wouldn't see me cry. Nights felt different too. I didn't check the locks twice. I didn't reread court papers in bed. I didn't count the hours of sleep I'd lose. Instead, I watched Lila sleep, her arms wrapped around that battered giraffe, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. And I let myself feel something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Safe. Being soft isn't celebrated in this world. We worship strength, toughness, stoic endurance. But here's what I've learned. Soft doesn't mean weak. Soft means safe. Soft means strong in the places that matter most. Soft is holding your child's hand while facing a judge who could change your life. Soft is letting yourself cry in a laundry basket so your daughter doesn't have to. Soft is waking up every day, exhausted, but still showing up. Still cooking dinner. Still reading stories. Still singing lullabies when your voice is cracking. Soft is standing in the middle of a storm and not letting it take your love with it. Lila didn't want a perfect mom. She wanted me. And that was enough. More than enough. To anyone out there walking through a custody battle. To anyone who has ever been told they're not enough. To any parent crying quietly after bedtime. Please hear this. Your love matters. Even when it's messy. Even when it's questioned. Even when it's quiet. You are doing better than you think.